I got a call from my wife one day. It was about 15 years ago. I was at work. She was at home and she was on her 2-week break that school teachers had. This was before we were homeschooling. My wife was still a school teacher. And she was on her 2-week Christmas break. And we had one child at the time. And she called me at work and she said, "You have to see this nun on channel 36 or whatever the channel was at the time." And I said, "Well, what about her?" And she said, "She's real enthusiastic and she's funny and she's very serious about the Catholic faith and it's just so good." And so this was on a Tuesday. So I got home that day and I had been going through a little conversion at that time. I was beginning to pray in the morning and some things were going on that I had no idea why it was happening, but it was. So I got very interested in this and I got home and Mother Angelica's live show was on that night. This was Mother Angelica on EWTN. So I watched her show that night and I'll never forget it as long as I live. She said something that night that I still think about today. She said in the midst of her talk, she was talking about the Eucharist, and she said the phrase, body, blood, soul, and divinity. And I had never heard that phrase that way. Now, I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic schools my whole life. And I sat there after the show was over, and I remember I was just floored by that. Because I thought to myself, body, blood, soul, and divinity, that means the whole person is there. That the whole person of Christ is there. And I kept thinking, did she really mean that? So the whole next day I kept thinking about it. And I told my wife, I said, if that's true, then why are Catholics so indifferent about the Eucharist? Why is there such a lack of teaching about it? And it really started to make me think. So I watched her show again the following week. And she was talking about the Mass. And I got interested in going to daily Mass. And I told my wife, I said, if that's Christ on the altar, I want to be there at Mass. See, Mother was leading me back to the sacraments. That's what she was doing. I had not been to confession in probably 25 years. My wife and I would go to Mass sporadically. This night that Mother Angelica was talking about the Eucharist set me on a 15-year journey. This was 1996, late 1996. And I started investigating and started reading about the Eucharist. And like a lot of Protestants that come to the church, I got very excited about it. I started going to Mass every day, started making visits to the Blessed Sacrament, and I was amazed that so few people were as excited as I was. The Eucharist is the source and summit of the faith. It's everything. It's everything for Catholics. It's Christ Himself. And so I hope this talk will inspire, especially the men, to start looking into their faith, discover the Eucharist, and then spread that to their children. The other thing Mother Angelica always stressed was every show she would say, go to confession. She would always say, go to confession, go to confession. And remember, this is late 1996. The following Christmas Eve, 1997, I finally got my courage up and I went and made a general confession. And since then, I have been trying to the best of my ability to live the sacramental life of the church. You know, if we're gonna decide that we are gonna learn the teachings of the church, we're gonna try to live it to the best of our ability, and we're gonna try to teach our children to also live according to the teachings of the church in the society that we live in, we have to have sustenance. We have to have help. You know, confession is God's way of restoring us to His grace. You know, sin is our enemy. Sin is the problem. Our problem is not our children. Our problem is not our spouse. Our problem is not the political climate that we're living in. Our problem is sin. Sin is a cancer on our soul. It weakens us. It darkens our minds. It makes us confused. And so we don't make good decisions. We're not strong in our faith. So confession is God's remedy for that. A young priest in our area who I was there one day when he was making a talk. And he said the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, is God's way of touching us. He says, in fact, when he's about to receive communion, his prayer is, Jesus, we're going to kiss. we're going to touch, you're going to touch me. And he said we're supposed to be filled with amazement at that. The sacraments are rivers of grace. That's a good way to think about it. It's channels of grace to us. What happens when we cut ourselves off from that? Are we going to suffer as parents? Yes. Are our kids going to suffer? Are our kids going to lose out because mom and dad are not living the life, the sacramental life of the church? Grace is God's life within us. Sin destroys that life or distorts that life within us. And so we need to take advantage of what the church gives us. I have a good friend who meets with some spiritual brothers on a weekly basis, and they support each other and they talk about their faith life. And this man goes to Mass every morning, early Mass. And his friends that he groups with are hesitating to do that. They say it's too early in the morning, they're tired, they need their sleep. And he posed the question to him. He said, well, if you could get up early in the morning and you were going to go to a loan closing and you were going to get a big check and the closing was going to be at 5 o'clock in the morning, guarantee you'd be there on time. But when it comes to the Mass, well, we can't make time for that. How many times do we pass a Catholic church and it takes 5 minutes to stop, walk in, and say a short prayer? I have another friend who every morning before work stops, goes into the church, spends about 5 minutes in prayer, talks to the Lord, asks Him to help him, and he said it does so much good for him. Many people who make holy hours of adoration, where they go to an adoration chapel where Christ is exposed in the Blessed Sacrament. We have one here in our hometown that's perpetual adoration. He's there always. And many people say that if they keep that 1 hour where they go adore the Lord for 1 hour, it brings a peace into their life. It helps them to manage their problems better because the grace of God is there. He's going to bless us when He sees us that we're devoted to Him. Men, we have been given a great responsibility. In order to fulfill that responsibility, it is imperative that we live the sacramental life of the church. The Eucharist and confession are there for us. God bless you.